wash up. I've got to look normal. We've all of us got to behave normally.
When people remember young Frankenstein, they remember the black and white glow, the howling wind, and Gene Wilder's wild hair framed in lightning. It looked seamless, like a perfect imitation of a 1930s horror film. But behind that pristine image was a set full of fights, injuries, sleepless nights, and choices that could have killed the movie at any moment. In 1974, before streaming, before DVD commentaries, when you either caught a film in theaters or on late-night TV, nobody in the audience saw the arguments over jokes, the pain under those makeup jobs, or how close Mel Brooks came to walking away entirely. They just laughed. These are 20 facts about young Frankenstein that reveal what really happened behind the cobwebs. Fact number 1. The entire film started with one single, stubborn image in Gene Wilder's head. It wasn't a studio mandate or a focus group idea. Back when Hollywood still relied on the instincts of its talent, before the complete corporate takeover, Wilder pictured a modern descendant of Dr. Frankenstein riding a train to Transylvania. This character, Frederick, tried to deny his family name while the world refused to let it die. That scene, with the old couple at the station and the trunk labeled Frankenstein, lodged in his mind for years. He finally pitched it to director Mel Brooks between takes while they were filming Blazing Saddles. It was one actor grabbing a director by the mental lapels, saying, "I have this idea." And from that small, unwavering image, the entire movie was born. Fact number 2, Mel Brooks almost killed the project before the script was even written. Brooks had just burned himself out, wrestling Blazing Saddles into existence, and the idea of doing another period spoof exhausted him. At first, he told Wilder he absolutely did not want to direct. He would help shape the story, maybe produce, but that was it. Back then, creative control meant everything, and Brooks was too tired to start another fight. But Wilder wouldn't let go. He pushed and argued and kept calling. Brooks finally relented and gave a brutal condition. They would write the script together, line by line, in the same room, and if it wasn't good enough by their own standards, they would kill it themselves. No studio pressure, just two perfectionists, locked in a room with a typewriter and no exit sign. Fact number 3, the finished screenplay was forged in a kind of controlled combat. This was a time when writers still worked face to face, screaming over a single joke before instant messenger or email fragmented the creative process. Wilder and Brooks argued over almost every line, every pause, every raised eyebrow. Wilder wanted elegance and emotional beats. Brooks wanted chaos and bigger laughs. When they got stuck, they'd stand up, scream at each other, walk around the room, and then sit back down and keep typing. At least once, Wilder was so fed up he stormed out, convinced the film was dead, only to come back the next day and keep going. That tension, that refusal to settle for good enough in the writing, is exactly why the film feels so precise and yet so unhinged at the same time. Fact number 4, the film's most famous sequence, putting on the Ritz, almost didn't make it to the page, let alone the screen. Wilder was obsessed with the idea of a serious scientist presenting his monster to society through a tap-dancing number, then watching it fall apart. Brooks absolutely hated it. He thought the joke was too broad, too silly, a moment that would rip the audience right out of the carefully established 1930s world. The two of them fought about that scene so hard that Brooks stood up and gave an ultimatum. "If you insist on leaving this in, I can't direct the movie." Back then, a director walking away meant disaster, but Wilder held the line, telling Brooks the movie needed that insane swing to work. Brooks finally tried it in rehearsal, and when he saw Wilder and Peter Boyle together, he changed his mind. The scene stayed, and it became one of the most quoted moments in comedy history. Fact number 5, shooting the film entirely in black and white in 1974 was an era-defining, career-risking battle. The entire industry had moved on. Studios wanted color. Television wanted color. Executives told Brooks and Wilder that audiences would think the film was old or cheap. This was before niche markets, before art house films were widely distributed, when every movie was expected to be a wide-release event. Brooks threatened to walk if they forced color, knowing the film would die if it didn't look exactly like a real 1930s horror picture. They won the fight, but it came with a cost. Fewer marketing options and more skepticism from the money men. The gamble was simple and brutal. Either the authenticity would pull people in or the movie would disappear without a trace. Fact number 6. The incredible authenticity of the lab equipment was not just a clever set design trick. The electrical machines, the arcs of energy, the swirling gadgets around the operating table, they weren't just modern props designed to look old. They were the real Frankenstein history. The devices were built by the same man who made the equipment for Universal's original 1931 Frankenstein, Ken Strickfaden. Brooks and the crew tracked down his old devices, some literally gathering dust in storage, and convinced him to restore them. On set, this meant the equipment didn't just look dangerous, it was heavy, loud, and incredibly temperamental. Every time those coils fired up, the actors were surrounded by real electrical arcs and humming, dangerous machinery that could fail at any second. Fact number 7, that quest for authenticity came with a severe physical price for the lead actors. The lab set was packed with live electrical effects, hot lights, and heavy mechanical rigs. This was a time before the widespread use of green screen, before actors could simply mime the action in a comfortable studio. Peter Boyle, under full monster makeup, had to lie strapped to a platform surrounded by metal and wiring, while thunder effects rolled overhead. The makeup itself was thick and suffocating, turning long shooting days into an endurance test. Boyle sweated inside that greenish-gray skin until he was exhausted. There was no digital touch-up, no way to fix it later. Between takes, assistants rushed in with towels and water, trying desperately to cool him down before the next setup. On screen, he looks unstoppable. Off camera, he was barely staying upright. Fact number 8. Marty Feldman's improvisation with his character, Igor, quietly rewrote the movie's logic. Feldman treated the script as a starting point, not a cage. He improvised throwaway lines, twisted rhythms, and physical bits that nobody else would have dared. The most famous example is the moving hump gag. It wasn't in the script. Feldman simply started switching the hump from one side to the other without telling anyone. Back then, actors had more freedom to experiment and push limits before the digital capture process made spontaneity almost impossible. When Wilder's character finally points it out, Feldman's innocent, "What hump?" became a perfect example of the film's surreal internal logic. Reality bends around a joke everyone is forced to pretend is normal. That single, unscripted choice turned Igor from a sidekick into a surreal force that steals every scene. Fact number 9. Gene Wilder's legendary on-screen intensity was not an act. He lived inside that tempo while shooting. His hair, his eyes, the way his voice snaps from calm to hysterical. He cared deeply about the emotional core of Frederick Frankenstein. He was playing a man trying desperately not to become the very thing he feared, and he wanted the audience to believe the descent was real. When other actors or directors went too broad with a joke, undercutting that emotional thread, Wilder would genuinely get angry. There are stories of him walking off set for a few minutes just to cool down. He wanted every scream, every breakdown to feel like it came from a man genuinely cracking under pressure, not a clown mugging for the camera. His absolute commitment gave the comedy its foundation. Fact number 10. The long production schedule was also a quiet test of endurance for the women in the cast. Terry Garr's Inga and Madeline Kahn's Elizabeth both had to play recognizable types from the 1930s cinema, then twist them hard. Back when costumes were built for how they looked on camera, not how they felt to the actor, Garr worked inside outfits that were often tight, cold, and impractical on the drafty sets. Kahn, meanwhile, spent hours getting her elaborate hair and makeup just right for a character whose whole world is appearances and control. She was supposed to be untouchable. That relentless effort is why every later scene of dishevelment and surrender hit so much harder. Her transformation wasn't just a joke, it was a small demolition of the carefully constructed mask of the perfect woman. Fact number 11. Cloris Leachman's performance as Frau Blücher served a critical function. She made the atmosphere darker. Her performance isn't just funny, it's genuinely eerie. She leaned hard into the gothic menace, the unspoken past with the original Frankenstein, the sense that she was keeping dangerous secrets. That wasn't an accident. Leachman chose to play the part almost completely straight, hanging on to the horror roots while everyone else leaned into comedy. Even the famous horse whinny gag that triggers every time her name is spoken worked better because she never once winked at the audience. The laughter comes from the collision, her dead serious energy against a world that keeps slipping on banana peels. Fact number 12. There were moments when the physical comedy quietly edged into real danger for the actors. The chaotic scenes in the hay wagon, the rolling gurneys, the chases through stone corridors, none of that was a digital effect or green screen. The actors were genuinely thrown, dragged, and yanked around. This was the era before stringent modern safety protocols, when a lot more was simply shrugged off in the name of getting the shot. In one take, a prop door slammed much harder than expected, narrowly missing an actor's face by inches. They kept going because schedules were tight, The budget wasn't endless, and that's just how movies were made before modern liability concerns. Looking back, some of those gags feel like lucky escapes wrapped in punchlines. Fact number 13. For all its chaotic energy, the production was obsessed with discipline in one specific area: timing. Brooks and Wilder knew that if the rhythm of a gag was off by even half a second, the laughs would die immediately. They were working at a time when audiences in a single theater would experience the film collectively, and the entire room's reaction was dependent on that precision. They rehearsed tightly choreographed scenes again and again. The abnormal brain exchange, the dartboard moment, the candle by the bookcase. They were rehearsed until every single beat landed exactly where it needed to. The final product looks loose, almost improvised. It wasn't. That relentless precision is why people who have watched the film 20 times still laugh in the exact same places. The perfect comic timing locked into their bodies and never left. Fact number 14. One of the film's quietest but most effective advantages was its melancholy, sweeping musical score. Composer John Morris didn't treat Young Frankenstein as a cartoon. He gave it a sweeping, genuinely melancholy theme that could have easily scored a straight Gothic romance film. That violin melody, especially over the shots of the castle and the countryside, gives the film a strange, essential softness beneath all the screaming jokes. It reminds the audience there is a real story of legacy, grief, and obsession under the slapstick. Back then, composers often had a richer understanding of classic film scores, and Morris utilized that tradition to deliver emotional weight. That layer of emotion is why the ending, with the monster gaining refinement and the doctor gaining a little monster of his own, feels oddly moving instead of just clever. Fact number 15. The studio didn't fully grasp what they had until audiences proved it in a major way. Young Frankenstein was weird. A black and white horror parody in an era of bright, glossy, new Hollywood films did not look like a safe bet on paper. This was a time when the risk was higher, before computer models could predict success. Test screenings were the turning point. People didn't just laugh, they roared. They repeated lines walking out of the theater. They talked about it like they'd just seen something both familiar and brand new. Word of mouth turned what could have been a small cult oddity into a major box office success. That audience reaction, shared collectively in theaters across the country, also validated every single stubborn choice they had fought for: the battles over black and white, the insistence on doing it the hard way. Fact number 16. Beneath all the hilarious chaos, a deeper, essential fear quietly drove the entire film's narrative. That fear was the terror of becoming what you hate. Frederick spends most of the story furiously insisting he is not like his grandfather, not a madman, not a monster maker. That tension came straight from Wilder's own obsession with characters who are coming apart under pressure while desperately pretending they're fine. You can see it in the way his voice cracks, the way he grabs his own face, the way he tries to rationalize every mistake. The comedy works because the core fear is genuinely real, that no matter how hard you deny your past, it's still inside you, waiting to be resurrected. The film is a secret psychological breakdown disguised as a joke. Fact number 17. The creature itself, the monster, was never intended to be just a gag. Peter Boyle gave him a tragic humanity. Boyle plays him as a wounded child trapped in a body built for pure violence. The scene with the blind hermit could have been a throwaway sketch, but Boyle's reactions, hurt, confused, desperate for kindness, make it feel incredibly sharper. The world keeps forcing him into brutality and fear, and he keeps trying to reach for connection. Back when performances relied on physical commitment over digital enhancement, Boyle's layered performance was everything. When the monster finally gains a voice and speaks eloquently at the end, the surprise isn't just that he can talk, it's the film admitting that he was never the problem. The real monsters were fear, human arrogance, and the urge to completely control what you create. Fact number 18. The on-set life was a constant, exhausting tug-of-war between chaos and control that mirrored the film's story. Brooks pushed for bigger, Wilder held for precision, and the crew tried desperately to keep everything from falling apart. Long days, heavy costumes, and the temperamental, real electrical equipment all built a kind of low-grade madness on set. People got snappish. Tempers flared. This was the era when you had to work through the friction. You couldn't retreat to separate trailers or private digital feeds. Then someone would nail a line reading, or the real lab sparks would hit at the exact perfect moment, and the whole set would collectively exhale. That brutal cycle repeated until the film finally locked picture. The finished product looks absolutely seamless, like it was born effortless. It was anything but. Fact number 19. Young Frankenstein also carried the weight of timing in a much larger cultural sense. Its release in 1974 was a pivot point in film history. Color TV was everywhere, and new Hollywood films were breaking rules in violence, language, and style. This movie looked backward, deliberately rooted in the 1930s, but its comedy was sharp enough to feel completely current. It became a critical bridge between eras, rooted in the past, but born in the cynical 1970s, and then watched endlessly on VHS and cable by people who grew up on both. For viewers who first saw it in a massive theater with sticky floors and a single giant screen, back when films were massive communal events, it fixed itself into memory as proof that old and new could powerfully collide and still work. Fact number 20. In the end, the film's greatest trick is that it successfully hides its risk and pain behind an illusion of ease. It feels effortless. It feels like it has always existed, a piece of cultural fabric you grew up with. But every single choice, shooting in black and white, using borrowed, real, and dangerous lab equipment, employing physical gags that nearly caused injuries, the brutal script wars between the two creators, could have easily gone wrong and completely killed the film. The fact that it didn't is why Young Frankenstein still feels so fiercely alive decades later. It is a complete resurrection of a genre, of an old style of filmmaking, and of a way of committing so hard to a joke that you are willing to bleed, sweat, and argue for it. And once you know what it truly cost the people who made it, every lightning flash on that screen hits a little deeper. It was too much work, too many arguments, and too much physical risk for a comedy, but that's precisely what they delivered. A film built not on convenience or modern comfort, but on stubborn conviction and the commitment to a single vision that only a handful of people believed in. For those who remember seeing it on the big screen or staying up late to catch it on television, back when films had to earn their legacy through repeat viewings, it remains unforgettable. They don't make them like this anymore. That chaos, that danger, that commitment to suffering for a single laugh, that's the real secret ingredient. And if Young Frankenstein's chaotic, dangerous production sounds familiar, that's because all true classics are just beautiful disasters barely contained.